What's going on, everybody? For those that will join in, for those that'll catch the replay a little bit later, man, we got my man on today, someone who I have a lot of respect for, on in his field, but also as a man in general, man. Morgan Campbell is with me today. What's going on, my man?
Man, I'm good. Always good to be here. The best looking duo in podcasting. We're ready to go, man. And you'll be glad to know this. You know where I was all afternoon? I was at the track with my 5-year-old daughter.
Oh, you getting some workouts in?
Yeah, I'm starting to get my old man body to start running fast again. It's a process. My advice to you, Akeem, is don't get old. I think that's the best way.
Man, that's a tough one. Man, before we start, man, I gotta ask. It's something I never really asked you before, man. You've been covering boxing for a while now.
Yeah.
What was one of the first fights that you remember covering, and what was kind of the first fight that you actually watched, if you can remember?
Wait, as a journalist?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I don't even know the first fight I covered live. It's a good question. The first big boxing story I did at the Toronto Star, this was literally 23 and a half years ago, was a feature on Troy Ross. Do you remember Troy Ross from Brampton?
What?
Egerton Marcus's, these guys are probably older than you. Egerton Marcus's cousin. And Troy's thing was that he competed in the 96 Olympics. And then instead of turning pro in 96, after the 96 Olympics, he stuck around 4 more years because he basically had bet everything on winning a gold medal in 2000 and then signing a huge contract from there. And then, and his other side hustle was that he was into fashion design. So he would, he would create trunks for himself and for other fighters. But basically, he went to the Olympics in Sydney, wound up losing this big upset loss in the first round. And so then, he had waited 4 years and still wanted to turn pro, but just had to overcome all this inertia to turn pro. So the first big boxing story I did at the Toronto Star was towards the end of 2000, early 2001, about Troy Ross, with all this world-class talent, but without this Olympic medal to really force promoters to pay him a lot of money, trying to find a way to get a pro contract that would be suitable to him. Yeah. I think eventually he wound up signing with Main Events. And then the first fight I covered, it might have been on deadline. It might have been, it was a Canadian title fight between one of the Vanderpools. Double checking on this, but I think it was one of the Vanderpools against Brian Mackey. Does that sound right?
That's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Vanderpool. 2001 at the Hershey Center. That might be the first fight I covered live.
Yeah, I haven't heard Vanderpool in a while, man. Wow.
They're both around. Sid's still around. He got a gym in Kitchener. Fitz might also have a gym in Kitchener. But yeah, they're still around.
Pablo B, what's going on, my man? Good to see you, man. I appreciate you taking the time. Pablo is coming to us from Chile, Morgan. So he's
you know what it was? It was Brian Mackey versus one of the Hiltons. Sorry, I knew it was one of these fighting families. Okay, hold on.
All right, while you fact
keep talking, it's gonna bug me now until I.
While you hey man, this is why you an award-winning journalist, man. You know what you're doing. You fact check everything. Me. I just hope I don't get plagiarized a little bit later. My brother Francisco from AZ says a temporary yet much needed equilibrium has been restored to the universe because we have an undisputed heavyweight champion. Pablo says, cheers, Morgan.
Hey, Pablo, ¿cómo estás?
I fancy Fury in his rematch versus Usyk. Oh, man. We're going to get there, man. We're going to get there. Big Chris over in the UK says, big up everyone. Hope we are well. This past weekend was a win for boxing in my eyes. Seeing a proper fighting man become undisputed champion. I enjoyed the Fury tears. It was plus 800 for Usyk to win by split decision. Did you take that? Did you take that? Fury will be back. Let's be real. It wasn't a split decision. It was an easy win for Usyk. All right, man. We gonna get into.
So just before we go on.
Yep.
That fight was February 1st, 2002 at the Hershey Center in Mississauga. Brian Mackey defeats Alex Hilton for the Canadian middleweight title. That was the first fight I covered live on Deadline. Sid Vanderpool was on the undercard. That's why he was on the brain. But
that's why you're the man. Your memory going all the way back there, man. I appreciate you, man. Again, Morgan Campbell, we got him for an hour today. Drop any questions that you may have. Again, Morgan is also covering some of the fights this weekend, which we will get into. So we got to make sure his voice is all good and not too raspy. Man, I kind of want to work my way up to the Usyk fight.
Wherever you want to start, let's go.
I actually want to start right here, man. Giovani Santillan and Brian Norman Jr. This was the performance I felt like Brian Norman Jr. needed in order to put his name in the mix. This past couple of fights have been a little bit shaky. And I always felt like he was a guy who was tough. You could punch. He's got skill, but he just never had the performance to put it together. Santian, obviously coming off of a kind of in the same position as Norman was in, right? Like some good performance, but some shaky ones. But then he dominated Alexis Rocha, put his name in the mix. And this gave me the feeling of, again, going back to when Alexis Rocha fought Santillan, that high risk type of thing. Like, it's supposed to be one of those fights where it's, it's going to be tough, but it's more of a stay busy type of fight. And then you lose. And now you're not next for the title shot. And then this man takes it. It kind of reminds me of that. But what did you think about this fight, man? Did it give me your breakdown from it.
A couple things, man. One is that, yes, when they made the Rocha versus Santillan fight, even fight two undefeated guys on paper, but Rocha was supposed to win that fight. And this is supposed to be the fight where Rocha uses this win over an undefeated guy to show the rest of the world that he's the prospect and not just a prospect. And that win was supposed to vault him straight into the title picture. And Santillan says, I know I'm here because you guys think I'm going to lose, but I'm better than you think I am. If you don't believe me, just watch what I do to Rocha. So he beats Rocha. And now this fight, Santillan is Rocha. He's the guy now that has the undefeated guy in front of him. And he's supposed to beat Norman just to show everybody the difference between Norman, who's supposed to be a prospect, and Santillan, who now fancies himself the prospect. And so it was very interesting for me to watch how quickly those roles reversed and how quickly these plans can backfire. Except that here's the other layer I'm going to add to the Brian Norman story is that the first time I heard his name was in the context of Sparring Session Tall Tales. And so I was in Las Vegas covering some other fight, and I was talking to some guys, and they're like, yeah, Brian Norman, this kid named Brian Norman was in training camp with insert big name welterweight here and was giving him the blues. Now, the thing about Sparring Session Tall Tales is often they are tall tales. And so sometimes it's true that the prospect is beaten up on the established guy. Often they're not true. And it's different, a little bit different now because everyone has their phones out and sometimes these things hit the internet. But again, the stories that come from sparring sessions, again, these are tall tales and they undergo what your English teacher would call legendary accretion in the sense that each time the story gets retold, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So if Brian Norman was probably about 20 years old back then. So if 20-year-old Brian Norman is holding his own with the world champ, that's what happens in real time. When I tell the story to you, he had a slight edge over the world champ. When you tell the story to your buddy, he was working that world champ over, right?
Yeah.
But what we know is that like Brian Norman, there's a certain section of, the boxing gossip world that sort of understands what he's capable of under the right circumstances.
Absolutely.
So now I don't know if the people who made this fight with Norman as sort of like this B-side stepping stone, understood that he was also the star of these sparring session tall tales, or maybe they just dismissed them as sparring session tall tales. But it was, for me, like knowing with that in the back of my mind about Norman, and then seeing him finally put it all together on a pretty big stage against a very, very, very good opponent. That to me was a big breakthrough, obviously, because of the action involved too. It's a big breakthrough fight for him, because it's not like, it was a competitive fight.
Yeah.
Norman was still winning, but it was a competitive fight. Norman got touched. But it was a competitive fight against another guy who's world class. Like if either of those guys has a fight that competitive 4 or 5 fights ago, then you start asking questions about whether or not they're actually as good as they're supposed to be. But at that level, no, that's a very good spot for a competitive fight. But like Norman showed that he was a class ahead. And so now he's at the point where like, yeah, these sparring session tall tales, it's not just talk anymore. Now we're starting to see what he's actually capable of. That's very exciting, especially for the welterweight division.
Man, there was a comment when I did the breakdown of this video, and I told a lot of people were asking. I said, man, look, I think Santillan's going to be able to get it done just by a little bit the last 2 rounds. But there was a comment, and the name was Brian Norman. Now I don't know if it was Dad. I don't know if it was him. But he said, man, great breakdown, but you lean the wrong side. And I was like, well, great. This is the opportunity that he needed to rise to the occasion. And I feel like, this is one of the divisions where it's wide open now, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the great thing about it, is it's wide open. And I think Brian Norman might get elevated if, I don't remember what the reason was. I forgot what it was. Somebody may vacating about something like that. But the next question I have for you before we move forward is, man, what is next for Santillan? What's next for Brian Norman Jr.? Who would you like to see those two fight next?
Hey, Santillan, like, first of all, he needs a long vacation. Like that was a hellacious beating he took, And that's the kind of beating that could be career altering, depending on what he does from here. Like if he tries to get back into the ring too quickly, if he tries to prove himself, like from there, Santillan go beat up on some tomato cans. If you fight a guy with a winning record, make it a guy who built his winning record against a bunch of guys with underwater records. You know what I mean? There's no sense and no extra honor in like getting right back into a fight like that. Right?
Yeah, of course.
And and obviously Santillan just has things to work on, because there were things that Norman was just picking on, right? Mm-hmm. Norman kept just like posting him with that jab and lining him up for that straight right hand. Santillan just kept leaning into these uppercuts. Like these are things, and again, especially, you're the southpaw fighter against orthodox fighters, and once an orthodox fighter kind of shows the rest of the world what works against you, well, then these are holes you got to plug one way or the other, right? And it's better to work on those flaws against lower level opposition before you jump back into a fight against, a world-class welterweight, than to try to do that on the fly, against a guy that's top 10 in the world or whatever. And then Norman, he looks to me like, now, is he as good as like Boots Ennis? No. But like that second tier of world-class welterweight, like, is he up there with like the Yordanis Ugases and Cody Crowley's of the world? Yes. And so, partisan divides aside, it's tough for me to keep track of like who's allowed to fight who. But just in general, we're talking about like his peers, the types of fighters he's ready to face. That's where he is.
Man, I wasn't, him winning wasn't surprising to me, but how he won, man. I mean, dude, he did what Santillan did to Rocha, but except this looked worse. like this looked worse. But before we move on, man, let's touch on these comments. Next, we're gonna be touching on Navarrete and Bernie. Okay, here we go. Let's pick up, trying to find where we left off. Fury will retire for the 100th for the 100th time. J Dap, what's going on, my man? Shout out to you. J Dap 03 is a member, man. Much love and appreciation. I appreciate you, man. Fair enough. I don't look at the odds. They talk rubbish and nonsense. Big Ben, what's going on, man? I'm doing well. My brother can't complain. Always grateful, man. Hope you're doing well. Home wrecker, wrecking knee knocker. Were you one of the folks thinking Navarrete got robbed? No, I was not. I thought he lost fair and square. He looked terrible to me. We'll get there. Usyk, number 1 pound for pound. Would love to get your thoughts on that, Morgan. Giovani became very predictable, just being overly aggressive, using jab, lack of defense. I had a feeling Norman Jr. was going to win. I had him on the money line. 350 was 900 for Norman KO. Man, you sound like you did your thing. I don't agree with the unsportsmanlike conduct from Norman Jr. after he KO'd. Yeah, I mean, it's.
But wait a minute. But did you give the money back after? Exactly.
Oh man, Norman looked terrible a few months ago, but great Saturday night. Absolutely, man. Nick, good to see you. Norman Jr. would lose to Stanionis, in my opinion. Norman earned a fan. He needs to train more than ever. One fight doesn't make you the best. Leave social media alone and train. Are you talking about Norman? Who are you talking about here?
Well, he might lose to Stanionis, but that's the level of fighter he's ready for. You know what I mean? If he's going to move forward, like he can't go back and fight, I don't know, Castillo Clayton. You know what I'm saying? Like
Santian should rematch.
That's what he showed he's ready for. That's his level now. That's his class.
Gio versus Real Carell if he wins. Norman Jr. last fight versus Boca Chica, he got dropped. If it wasn't for that accidental headbutt, Norman Jr. that was a very competitive fight. That was going to be very interesting how that one played out. Real Carell is a cab driver. My one knock on Robert Garcia would be most of his fighters are not defensively sound at all. Thoughts on that, Morgan?
I'm trying to think. I don't have a mental Rolodex of Robert Garcia fighters. If you name some of them, I could. But we did see Santillan just eating the same punches over and over Saturday night, right? And Norman was throwing that straight right hand right down the pipe. And that's a fight. That's a punch too. That as a southpaw, like you understand that's the punch they're trying to line you up for. And as a southpaw, because you face so many more orthodox fighters, you should just have sort of a built-in advantage in terms of finding the angle for that punch, like Usyk did against Fury on Saturday. But yeah, so it is strange that like this guy spent his whole career, his whole life as a southpaw fighter. He knows the orthodox fighters are trying to line him up for that straight right.
Mm-hmm.
And he just kept eating it, until he got his nose broken.
Roman Vila is a snow cone vendor. Jeez, you guys, that's how you guys are feeling today. Norman is a champ. He must go to Unify. I mean, you would. I don't know, man.
From there, that's when you get into the business and the politics of boxing, and like, what is Brian Norman put on a great performance? What is he going to do? Like, what does he bring to the table financially that's going to get Boots Ennis into the ring now,
Yeah. There's that like business side that
we just saw Cody Crowley bring the entire welterweight division to a standstill just because he would not sign a contract. Like whatever Heyman kept offering him, he kept saying, no, I need more. No, I need more. No, I need more. And that fight with Boots Ennis was never going to happen, but because of the way the sanctioning bodies were set up, they're like, I think it's IBF. They're like, but you got to fight Crowley before anyone does anything. And Crowley just kept saying, well, give me more money. Give me more money, give me more money, give me more money. And that's what wound up sending Boots to go sign with Eddie Hearn. And Eddie Hearn's like, all right, well, I guess I got to pay $4 million for this fight.
So here it is.
Right? So I have to say this, like, from here, we love to set up the hypotheticals and it all should make sense, but often the thing that makes sense never happens because this is boxing.
Sounds like the sport that we enjoy watching, man. I actually thought the stoppage would come from Santillan. How wrong was I? That's the beauty about boxing, man. You know, you never know how it's going to pay out. Norman Jr. was giving it to Bud Crawford in sparring.
I'm not the one that said the name. I'm not going to tell you that's not what I heard.
Lenny, what's going on, man? I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. Last couple comments before we jump to Navarrete. Navarrete and Venado will struggle versus technical boxers and dens. Man, I think Navarrete would struggle more. I actually think Venado would do a much better job. I think he comes in much better shape physically. And he's got a little bit more discipline and skill than I think Navarrete does, but we'll talk about that just next. A lot of ups this past weekend. Absolutely. Could Norman Jr. be upgraded to world champion with Crawford now at super welterweight? Morgan knows more about the inside of that more than I do.
Except I don't ever pretend to know what decision any sanctioning body is going to make at any moment. Could he be? Possibly. Are we talking WBO?
Is that WBO, Chris?
Like,
Chris will jump back in.
It could happen. But I just don't pretend to know what decision any sanctioning body is ever going to make, ever. Like, we've had fighters like Alicia Baumgartner tested positive. Her pre-fight,
yeah,
doping control test came back positive, and I can't remember which belts she won in that fight against Lindartu, but like none of those sanctioning bodies said, okay, well, you're not our champion now. They were just like, oh, I guess she tested positive. 6 months suspension. Now you're back to doing whatever it is you do. So do not ask me to pretend to know what any sanctioning body is going to do at any moment. Because I mean, if we're betting on them doing the thing that makes sense, it's not something I put my money on.
Man,
so
I don't even really try to understand it. Some things I just leave alone. Let's talk about Navarrete, man. Berinchyk wins split decision victory. Man, I remember hearing Tim Bradley say when he was in the fighter meeting, he was talking to Navarrete and he was eating a bag of M&Ms and he was just like, yo, what are you doing? I've always said this, man. Navarrete to me is one, especially at 126, 130. He is very hot and cold. Like when he's locked in and when he's in good physical shape, like the man is tough to beat. The version that fought Oscar Valdez is tough to beat. But then there are fights where he just looks terrible physically. He's not always a guy who comes in impeccable shape, but you should be looking at least decent. Look soft around the belly. He just didn't look good. But Berinchyk didn't look great either.
He didn't. You talked about him showing up in shape, and that's not the fighter that I felt like. I didn't get a chance to see the whole fight, but that's not the fighter I think I saw on Saturday. And the other thing is, you see this with fighters all the time in lower weight classes, in the sense that in some ways it's easier to move up a lot of weight classes in the lower weight classes because the absolute difference between each weight class is pretty small. It's 4 or 5 pounds when you're that little. But at the same time, like a lot of the stuff that you can get away with at 126, you can't get away with it 130, and you definitely cannot get away with it 135. And like, if conditioning is the corner you're cutting, and you're in against a guy who's native to the weight class and has better punch resistance than the guys you're used to fighting, well, then like, you can cut that corner if you want, but it's going to cost you, which I have not seen the whole fight yet, but
yeah. Like when I did the breakdown of that video, man, I remember saying this: Navarrete is bound to lose a fight at some point. Like, you just can't get away with his preparation, his uniqueness in how he fights. And a disciplined fighter was going to beat him. I didn't think it was going to be Berinchyk, but on this night it seemed to be enough. But I didn't think he fought a great fight either. Like, this was kind of boring. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I'm usually a little bit more lenient and stuff, but this was kind of boring, man. It wasn't the fight that I was expecting. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't. But what I did like was post-fight interview. Navarrete was on the ropes talking, but having a conversation. It was like he was reflecting on. It looked like a moment to me where you reflect and you think about, okay, man, like this is a guy that maybe I was supposed to beat. And maybe I beat myself here. I didn't come in shape. I didn't do the best that I was supposed to do, and it caught up to me. So I'm hoping maybe that is a turn of the guard and for him to take his preparation a little bit more seriously. And I don't think he should stay at 135, but that's just me. I'm not his manager. They know what's best. But thoughts about the preparation leading up to it, man. When you think about, you've been in you've seen Andy Cruz fight. You've seen training camp with him. You've told me how he was looking, and he was with Boots as well too. What were some of the preparation type of stuff that you were seeing with those men that you, obviously hypothetically speaking, might say, just looking at Navarrete, that maybe he wasn't doing? Does that make sense?
Well, they're completely different fighters. But stylistically, they're completely different.
Absolutely.
Andy Cruz, I would watch Andy Cruz versus every slowish pressure fighter in the world. That is my absolute favorite style matchup to watch. Line them all up. These guys just walk straight into Andy Cruz and think that pressure is going to win the day. Absolute favorite style matchup. But the thing about the difference between the two of them too is that, Cruz had this long amateur background. And with a lot of Cuban fighters, a lot of them think that alone is enough, and that these skills that you polished as an amateur will translate directly to professional boxing, which is also why you don't see a ton of professional fights between Cuban fighters, between Cuban expatriates. Right? Because a lot of what the Cuban fighters are trying to prove, even after they leave Cuba, come to the United States, move to Germany, wherever, turn pro, is that the Cuban school of boxing, their style of boxing, their technique, their skill set is superior to the rest of the world. And you're not going to get an answer for that if they fight each other. So it's very much about, well, look, we are better than Americans, we're better than Mexicans, we're better than Japanese fighters, whatever. Whereas the fight that we all love to see as boxing fans is a fight between two Mexicans, right? Mexican style versus a different type of Mexican style. We like seeing that. And so those two guys like Navarrete and Cruz are just coming from such different places stylistically and in terms of background. But, and this is probably where it works to the advantage of a guy like Cruz, is because he understood and understands that what made him great as an amateur by itself is not going to make him great as a professional. And so I know what they're doing in Philly is, they're not trying to reprogram or make him something different. They're not trying to take anything away from him, but they're trying to add professional elements to his game. Whereas if you're a guy like, and Cruz is in his mid to late 20s, understanding that he has to make these adjustments. Whereas if you are Navarrete, like, doing it your way has been so successful so long as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that's going to prompt you to make the changes you need to make when doing it your way has always worked?
Yeah, good point.
Whereas a guy like Cruz understands that doing it my way might work for a while in the pros, but I do have to change some things. And so Navarrete, it's, as you said, like, is this going to be the thing he needs to start taking his prep seriously? Maybe. And no, listen, 135 is not the weight class for him, only because if he wants to dominate and be a champion, like 135 just has Tank, Lomachenko, Shakur, and the only one really, I don't know, I like Frank Martin, so that's a much more competitive fight than we think it is. But, like, Frank Martin aside, the only one that could beat any of those guys is another one of those guys. You know what I mean? It does not matter what Navarrete does. No disrespect to Berinchyk. Berinchyk could have two Berinchyks. They're not beating Lomachenko. The two of them together at the same time are not beating Lomachenko, are not beating Shakur, are not beating Tank. You know what I mean? And so Navarrete, like, if he wants to get a title and hold the title, he just couldn't beat Berinchyk. Like, what are his chances of beating Shakur?
Yeah.
What are his chances of beating Loma?
Yeah.
What are his chances of beating Tank? Less than 0. And if Frank Martin beats Tank, that means Frank Martin is that good. And so what are your chances of beating Frank Martin? Sub-0. So maybe 130 is a better place for him.
We got Morgan Campbell on the show today, award-winning sports journalist, man. We're going to move forward, but let me get back to these comments, and then we're going to talk a little Tyson Fury and Usyk. Maybe the name should be reversed at this point now. I never want to see Navarrete at the weight again. That's what Saul says. I'm not mad at that. Chris said, yes, WBO to the previous question. Loma versus Berinchyk is the co-main event for Fury versus Usyk 2.
That would be such a big celebration of Ukrainian boxing.
Oh.
But like, just like with the Cuban boxers, is there a market to see two Ukrainians against each other, or do we want to see them, like, holding the flag high against everybody else?
I want Norman Jr. versus Serhii Boachuk. That's a war type of fight, man. Somebody getting stopped in that one. Navarrete not been good in his last 3 fights. Got found out moving up to lightweight. These Ukrainians know how to win. Man, the way how the Ukrainians are fighting and how much success they've been having, does it make you think about, is David Benavidez in trouble? Maybe. I don't know. Boachuk would smoke Norman, plus Boachuk is at 154. I mean, Norman looks like he could make that weight pretty easily. Yes. Usyk. Oh, Lena, what's going on, man? Usyk won easily. Most of Fury's punches were blocked on gloves and arms undisputed. I don't know about easily, man, but I hear you. Boachuk Stanionis. Thank you to his, I can't call him His Excellency. His name is Turkey, for making these fights happen. Hey, the Saudis got the money. Money always speaks. Benavidez may be in trouble against Ukrainian. Yeah. Navarrete looked like he fought at his walking around weight. I agree. He should go back down. His power isn't carrying. It's crazy how Navarrete went from looking like a beast when he fought Valdez to having back-to-back lackluster performances in his last 2 fights. He should have stopped Robson Conceição. But shout out to Conceição for going back to the basic 1-2 and finding a way how to win. Benavidez moving up to light heavyweight 2, which is his first at light heavyweight. But don't blame Benavidez for taking it with Canelo cherry picking. I reckon it'd be Zepeda versus Berinchyk. Loma will fight Tank or Shakur. All right, man. Let's go over to the heavyweight title.
Let's do it.
Oleksandr Usyk, Tyson Fury. Man, what did you think of the lead up to this fight? Well, 3-part question, Morgan. I'm gonna
ask me the first part first, and then the second part.
Okay.
I promise you, I'll forget the 3 parts of the question.
What did you think about the lead up of this fight, man?
In terms of which?
In terms of it being rescheduled, do you think that killed some of the momentum? Do you think it helped one of them? Like, what did you think about that process of it?
No, the delay helped Tyson Fury. And what this sort of was Tyson, sometimes he's really focused on his craft. Other times he's not. I think he had a good, he looked to us to have had a really good training camp, but he has just sort of been staying like one step ahead of fate for a long time, And so even the first time this fight was scheduled, remember, for December, and then Fury took the fight with Ngannou and he almost lost. And on the one hand, then there was a temptation to think that, okay, Tyson Fury clearly does not have the skills anymore. His skills have eroded if he's barely beating this mixed martial arts fighter. But Tyson Fury, what we know about him is that, between fights, he can get tremendously out of shape, right? And he's just always had this knack forgetting himself when he really needs to peak, because there's fights where he does not look good, but like when he needs to look his best, he finds a way to do it. He won the title against Klitschko, the fights against Deontay. But that was clear that he booked those two fights at the same time, and he went into this fight against Ngannou, and that was like week 1 of a 10-week training camp, and that's all he thought it would be. So he could get around and just move a little bit. This is like a 10 in his brain, 10-round sparring session. I don't have to be in great shape. I'm just gonna go do some stuff because it's week 1 of a 10-week training camp. And then he wound up, getting dropped, getting a black eye, getting some injuries. It took some time to heal. And so again, just like with Navarrete, we were talking about like wake-up calls, what's going to get you to take your prep seriously. I think that was his wake-up call to take his prep seriously because he appeared to have taken the prep for the Usyk fight very seriously. Now, I don't know which of them benefited from the delay because of the cuts, but in terms of like the build-up commercially too, we can always sell like, undisputed champion fights. Sort of my problem with like the pre-fight documentary was that I tried to watch it. It just wasn't enough about the people, like the characters. Who are these people? Who are these men?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the boxing fans are going to watch it either way.
Yeah.
Casual fans might watch it because it's an undisputed heavyweight title fight, but you can also just get people hooked on the personalities. When I watched the pre-fight documentary, it's just a series of people saying, undisputed champion. This is so important for boxing. It might be. You haven't explained to me why, but after the first 5 times I hear it, I don't need to hear it 15 more times. And so I don't know what the pay-per-view numbers are going to look like for this. I know this pay-per-view was cheaper than the Canelo pay-per-view. They might always struggle with numbers as long as the fights are in Saudi Arabia and they're on Saturday afternoon instead of Saturday evening. But, that time slot might help European viewers. So, but in terms of like the build up to this fight, I think the people involved could have done a better job of really letting the casual fan, letting them know what was at stake, not just in terms of boxing history, which the casual fan still doesn't really care about, but between these two men.
Yeah.
Because if you can get them hooked on 2 characters, you can sell more. Like nobody cares about a super welterweight title like a casual fan, but that's what got people hooked on Floyd versus Oscar 17 years ago, is that documentary series got people hooked on those characters. And to me, that was a missed opportunity in the build up to the fight.
The actual fight, man. I want to get your thoughts on it. I was at a wedding, so I didn't even see it live. I actually saw it this morning. So I was like, I'm at the wedding and they're like, oh, you now may pronounce them husband and I'm on the phone like, You're
like Jamie Foxx in the MGM commercials. And they're making it's supposed to be a joke. And I'm like, no, this man has a serious gambling problem. Like, this is, I was like, man, addict behavior. Yes. Okay.
I was like, yo, but I was also getting a lot of DMs saying, man, Oleksandr Usyk washed him. It was easy. It was this and that. I was like,
those people were not watching the fight.
When I watched the fight, but that's the thing. Everybody's biasness sometimes is either far right or far left. And I'm right down the middle. Like, I don't have a relationship with either of these guys. I want to see a great fight. But when I watched the fight, obviously I saw a much different thing than what was being told to me. But when you watched the fight, man, what did you see?
One, I noticed Fury had figured out what was going to work for him.
Yeah.
Right. And that was keeping Usyk at the end of the jab. And the advantage that Fury has is he's so long, he can throw body shots without getting close to you. Like, most people got to be close to you if they're going to hit you to the body. And they got to be in your punching range. But Fury can hit you to the body from his range. And you saw him looping those sort of roundhouse rights to like Usyk's left side. Sorry. Usyk. Yes. Sorry, I'm picturing the orthodox versus the
southpaw.
Southpaw. Yeah. Behind his left elbow. Rear elbow. Like, it's hard to throw those punches, against a southpaw, because you got to reach across his whole body. But like, when you're as long as Tyson Fury can, this is one of the advantages he has. And you could tell this was part of his game plan. You know, in around round 3 or 4, like he really started making that work. You know, and landing these body shots because I think they got the. It's weird, you know, because you hear people say this guy doesn't like it to the body, and then you'll hear Max Kellerman say nobody likes it to the body, which is true. But there were points in this fight where Usyk looked genuinely bothered. Absolutely. He had to back up and regroup and figure out how he was going to get inside without getting touched to the body. But I don't know, like for Fury, maybe just the physical cost of maintaining that offense was too much for him. Because you see this point in the fight where he just kind of goes away from that and decides he's going to circle. And the thing about that fight, you know, if I were to encapsulate it, it was basically whoever spent the least time moving backwards was going to win that fight.
Yeah.
And Fury, I know, is in love with the way he can move as a big man and was showing people that he is more agile and more light-footed and has better footwork and upper body movement than you expect from a guy that's 6'9". But he's at his best when he's being 6'9", when he's being 6'9", 270, moving forward, putting that weight on you and forcing you to deal with it. And so there are points in this fight where he is very much like how when I hear NBA fans, like when I hear Bomani Jones talk about Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah.
He's 7 feet tall. Just get your big ass in the paint. Okay, you can step out sometimes. That's fine. But you're 7 feet tall. Get in the paint. Get some rebounds. Score down there. I got little guys that can shoot from outside. And this is Fury like, oh, let me box. Let me get. No, don't go. Why are you going in the corner? Like, you can't. All right. Well, this is how you lose rounds. Like you are at your best when you're moving forward, just being 6'9". And Usyk, too. Like there are points where, again, he kind of had to retreat to regroup, but he understood that the more he moved forward, the better it was going to be for him. And you saw Fury circle counterclockwise, you know, which against the southpaw you don't really want to do. But there were points where you could see why he was doing it because he wanted to line Usyk up for that uppercut. But he just kept walking, especially after the 8th round. There was the round, whichever round where Fury caught that overhand left that made his nose bleed. And then the next round is when Fury was almost out.
Yeah, 9th round, I believe. He was almost out on the 9th round. So probably the 8th round is probably what you were talking about.
The second half of that fight pretty clearly belonged to Usyk, but you know, most of the first half belonged to Fury. So yeah, it was a fairly clear Usyk win, but it doesn't mean this fight was lopsided in Usyk's favor. It does not mean that Tyson Fury did not have his moments because he did. But it's just this, it became clear that he could not sustain the offense. The offense that was most effective for him come in, he could not sustain it. Here's my daughter. Hi, Nova.
Oh, Nova's in the house.
Yes, she is. Say hi.
Hi, Nova.
Say hi.
What's going on?
Oh, she can't hear you. He said hi.
Hi.
Special guest in the house. Shout out to Miss Nova over there, man.
Did you watch the boxing with Daddy?
No.
Yeah, you did. You were sitting on the floor. Okay, Nova.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're so sweaty.
I'm so sweaty.
Daddy, can we go for a walk after?
Yeah, after. Yes, after. Okay, say bye.
Bye, Nova.
Close the door behind you, baby.
I don't want to go downstairs.
What, Nova? Oh, jeez. Okay.
Hey, Nova,
hopefully she won't. Nova.
Nova's mom is a world champ in the 100-meter hurdles, so you know we can't pass over that. But
yes,
back to what you were saying.
Yeah, it's just, and it became clear that Fury could not sustain the offense that had won them those early rounds, and you could see him kind of hoping that Plan B, you know, to move and stay out of range would work for him, and it didn't. And again, but this is the guy, like he's always sort of one step ahead of fate, right? And it caught up with him. No, it's making too much noise. Please go downstairs, baby.
I don't want to.
So yeah.
Man, I was waiting for Tyson Fury to move like a big man. You know what I'm saying? Like I felt like he came into this one trying to outbox the he's not as good as a boxer as Oleksandr Usyk, man.
Yes.
But I feel like he came in trying to prove a point. And correct me if I'm wrong in this, Morgan, and everybody watching in the chat, you know, like some of the antic stuff that he was doing, kind of playing to the crowd on the, on the ropes. Was he doing that in the Klitschko fight? Like, was he doing some of that a little bit? Like, do you remember
I
that?
can't remember.
Look at all the nails.
I remember him kind of doing kind of that same
Nova.
similar antics and it trying to get into Klitschko's head a little bit because Klitschko is a serious cat. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like Ukraine, Usyk is a serious cat, mannerisms wise. And when that didn't work, I'm like, yo, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And then going back to boxing, he was too much on the back foot for me.
Much too much.
And the thing too, man, what I didn't like that he was doing, that Usyk did a great job of adjusting how he got his attack in, how he started to loop his hands around, because when Tyson got that lever in front of him, the man's reach is ridiculous.
Yes, Nova.
And he was doing that, but he was just sticking there, leaning back and not moving his head. And Usyk just came around it and hit him with that left over and over and over and over again. And I'm like, man, as someone who makes great adjustments, Tyson, like you didn't make that adjustment.
No. And you would think that, and again, as who am I to question Tyson Fury's ring IQ, right? But just this idea of just continuing to circle into that left hand, like once he clips you with it one time, a fighter as smart as Tyson Fury, you know, with a trainer as smart and as experienced as Sugar Hill.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why they couldn't make that adjustment. Like, where was the lead hook, right, to keep Usyk lined up for Tyson Fury's right hand? Where was the lead hook just to keep Tyson Fury on the outside of Usyk's lead foot? I didn't see it, and I thought I would see more of it. And I understand that if you're a Fury, you know that Usyk expects that because every orthodox fighter tries to do that against him. So you can cross him up to an extent by circling the other way, even though his left hand is there, and hitting him with that uppercut. But once you figured out that Usyk has figured that out, then you got to switch to something else. And fatigue might have played a role because Tyson Fury, again, he's a big guy, burns a lot of energy, and it's just difficult at his size to be as efficient, as fuel efficient, essentially, you know, as a smaller guy can be. And like all this output drains him in ways that it might not drain other people. But I was just surprised to see him keep circling into this punch that he knew was dangerous. And after he took the first big one and he got cut or got his nose bloodied, that he just kept doing the same thing. That was baffling to me. But again, it might have been a question of not having the gas tank to sustain the offense that was working for him. And he just had to try to do something else.
The ninth round, a lot of controversy on that, right? A lot of people thought that the ref should have stopped the fight. Fury was falling back on the ropes, but I didn't have a problem with the ref giving him the 10 count, because in a championship fight like that, man, you don't want it to get like that. You want to at least stop the fight and say, look, 10 count, 10-8 round, whatever the case is. I didn't have a problem with what the ref did. Did you have a problem with what the ref did?
Not a huge problem, but like in a mixed martial arts fight, that's a stoppage, because there was a moment where
1,000%.
Fury could not defend himself. And if the referee had stopped it right there, I wouldn't have been angry at all. Because, again, we as fans, we assume that the person on the receiving end of the assault is going to survive. Most times we're right, but sometimes we're not.
Yeah.
And, like, no one has to die or suffer brain injury in the ring to prove anything to me.
100%.
And so Tyson Fury is a really tough guy, and he proved it. And the referee knew it, and that's why the referee gave him so much leeway. Because any other heavyweight, or if this is just a lower stakes fight, you see a guy wobbled like that, it doesn't matter if they don't go down. It doesn't matter how much time is left in the round. It's clear that they are out on their feet and can barely defend themselves. The referee would step in and stop the fight, and we wouldn't think it was strange. You know, we all saw Ismael Barroso get stopped for a lot less than that against Rolly Romero. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So I understand too that the referees, like, I understand that this is Tyson Fury, and I've seen him come back from stuff like this. But I'm not sure. I'm trying not to second guess the referee. And I guess on the one hand, you have to take into account like who each individual fighter is.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you still have to like officiate what's happening in front of you. You know. Nova, that's too much noise. So Nova, that is too much noise.
But I blamed the magnet.
Nova, Sorry about this, guys. But
all good.
Yeah, and so him stopping the fight at that point would not have angered me at all. I wouldn't have felt shortchanged. He would have been justified in stopping it. I can see why he didn't, especially because the round was ending.
Yep.
I was a little bit surprised actually that he didn't step in and call a knockdown sooner, because it was clear earlier in that sequence that the ropes were holding up Tyson Fury. So at any point in that sequence, when Tyson Fury can't stand on his own power, you can call that a knockdown. So I'm surprised that knockdown call and the mandatory 8 count didn't come sooner. It came at a good time for Tyson Fury in the sense that the round ended not long after the 8 count did. Really tough call. Like I'm not going to come in and second guess the referee, but if he had stopped it in that moment, I wouldn't have been angry at all.
Before we get to the comments, I got to ask you, man, the rematch. Do you want to see that rematch, and how do you think it plays out? Do you think anything changes, or do you think it
was
worse?
A compelling fight? It was much more entertaining than either of the Anthony Joshua fights. And so if the Anthony Joshua fight deserved a rematch, this one definitely deserves a rematch. We'll see what their contract said on the first fight. Is there a rematch clause? Can either guy trigger it? And clearly Fury's going to want to trigger the rematch clause. I would watch that fight in a rematch. I would think that Fury is smart enough to make the adjustments like he did between the first Deontay fight and the second Deontay fight. Because the first Deontay fight, he tried to be that boxer.
Yep.
And it worked for much of the fight, but he also I think he got dropped twice in that fight. Gave up 2 10-8 rounds, and that was the difference. In the second fight, he said, I'm not going to dance. I'm just going to come in big, strong. I'm going to be 6'9", 270. I'm going to lean on this guy.
Lean on him.
That's what he did.
Yep.
And so Fury is capable of making those adjustments between fights. But Usyk has shown that he is smart enough and versatile enough to make these adjustments too. And Usyk, when you talk about who's the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world, it's Usyk. You know why? Because we just saw him record a clean win against a guy that weighed 30 pounds more than he did. Pound for pound, he is the best. He's the only guy fighting people 30 pounds heavier than he is. And so we don't have to ask. We don't have to try to triangulate results, project them, nothing like that. We saw what would happen. Usyk against a much bigger guy. Usyk did the thing. So he is the best. Nova, take this.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Come. You're not supposed to be in here. Come on, Nova.
Big Perdita in the house.
Yes. Here, Peter, come say hi to Hakeem.
Sorry. Hi, Hakeem. How are you?
I'm well, P. How are you doing?
Hey. Sorry, guys.
To Hakeem's audience, I don't know if you guys know this. Hakeem was a world-class sprinter. Represented Canada, has some world Olympic medals on the mantle. And my wife is also a retired Olympic sprinter. A retired Olympic hurdler from Canada. So they're like co-workers for a while, if that makes sense.
P still probably got a light, 13.5 in her right now.
Hakeem wants to know if you can run 13.5 right now.
I don't know 14 flat.
She says she can run 14 in the hurdles.
14 flat.
13.5, P. I'm not trying to hear that. 13.5. All right, let's go to some of these comments. I want to get Morgan's thoughts on a couple more things because he is commentating this weekend.
Yes.
I apologize if I don't get to everybody's comments. I'm trying to get to as much as we can while being respectful of Morgan's time while he's here. Usyk was just too good for Fury, and Usyk in his own postcode and heavyweight division said it for ages. Usyk made Fury average. You have been big on Oleksandr Usyk. That is the truth. I'll double down on that for you. Fury was hurting Usyk. Fury can KO Usyk by applying smart, aggressive pressure. If I'm Usyk, don't need to have rematch. He's completed it. He's done. It don't matter if Usyk loses next fight. Fury has to wait a few more fights to be undisputed. I think Usyk said he wants to possibly fight until, he's 40? Now, that may change, but we'll see. All that falling on the ropes in round 9 by Fury seemed like a wrestling match. WWE. AJ knocks Fury out. That's not out of the question there. Fury won 3. through 6 with his jab and feet. 7 and 8 were competitive. Then round 9 happened. Put percentages on it. How much was it Usyk's adjustments? How much was it that Fury can't dance for 12 rounds anymore? Thoughts
It
on
was
that?
a lot of both. It was a lot of. I don't think it was either or. I think it was both and.
I think the ref did a great job in not stopping the fight. I agree in that. Why was John Fury in Tyson corner? Look at John Fury boxing career. Yeah, exactly. Can't even stand on his feet. Got knocked out most of the times. Yikes. Fury was cruising to a victory until he got mollywopped. Akeem, please ask your guest Ammo or Shiraz June 1st.
Oh, listen, I haven't gone into I haven't had a chance to do the film study on that yet. So I'm gonna have to go look at each of their last 2 or 3 fights before I figure out who I think is gonna win that fight.
We shall
I don't want to make
back.
any predictions, based on no information.
Usyk clearly won the fight. Had it 116, 112. I agree with Usyk winning the fight, fair and square. It was a close fight, in my opinion. I don't understand if Usyk dominated the fight 12 rounds to 0, but Fury was hurting Usyk and just stopped. Yeah, there was a lot of people saying again, I was getting messages saying, man, it was an easy wash, easy win for Usyk, but I saw Usyk hurt a couple times in this fight.
No.
I agree with Usyk winning, but man, let's not go too far left. Tyson was doing work as well too.
But this is also a product of the sports debate culture we're in, and I don't know how we get out of it. So we don't discuss anything, we debate everything. And so if there's one side, there has to be an equally weighted other side so we can argue about it. So you and I can't just discuss how this was an entertaining, especially for heavyweights, a fairly high action bout that one guy won but was competitive. Because one guy won, we have to say he dominated. And then the other side of that argument has to be the guy that lost was robbed because, in fact, he dominated. No, this is how great fights look. They have their moments. There's momentum shifts. There's technical or tactical adjustments. And the person that makes the best adjustments winds up winning. This is how great fights look. But there's usually something in it for each guy. This is why it's high-level boxing. This is what we want. But we don't have to pretend that Usyk, we don't have to pretend that Usyk pitched a shutout because he didn't. And you're not supposed to pitch a shutout against the other best fighter in the world.
Salute. Shout out to my man Eric R, man. He told me that there is a fantasy boxing league, man. I didn't know that was a thing until he told me that. That was an amazing fight. Close with a lot of pendulum swinging. Very proud of Usyk until Fury I got hurt. Things were looking gloomy for Usyk. Then Usyk picked it up. I agree. Again, I apologize if I don't get all to the comments. Man, let's talk about some of the stuff you're doing this weekend, man.
Let's do it.
We can talk about Caterall Taylor another time, but Mbilli back into the ring against Mark Heffron, man. What do you think about this one, man? Would you say on paper it looks like it, but would you say this is a step up from Mbilli?
First thing, so for your audience, all right. I will be on the broadcast team for this fight. This is going to be on. If you are in Canada, you can watch it on punchinggrace.com. If you are in the US, you can watch it on ESPN Plus. So basically what happens is these promoters, I have the Tiger Management out of Montreal. They have a French broadcast because that's where most of their fans are. And now they have English broadcasts because they signed this deal with ESPN Plus. So their English-speaking audience went from literally a few dozen fans in Canada that would sit through the French because they love boxing that much to, tens of thousands of Americans. So they're like, all right, we got to get serious about English broadcasts now. So they called me and Corey Erdman. So we are their English broadcast team for these fights. And so, yeah, we will be on ESPN Plus this weekend, Christian Mbilli versus Mark Heffron in Shawinigan, Quebec, where this is my first time going to Shawinigan, Quebec. It's halfway between Quebec City and Montreal. So I'm very excited to go. But as for this fight, style-wise, this is a matchup tailor-made to make Christian Mbilli look great. in the sense that if you guys have not seen Christian Mbilli fight before, he is a 5'8", so he's not very tall. He's a 5'8".
I thought he was like 5'10".
No. He's a very muscular 5'8", super middleweight. Who, put it to you like this: some fighters are pressure fighters because they either lack the skill or the athleticism to win another way. So they default to pressure because that's the thing they can do. It doesn't, in their brains, it doesn't take a whole lot of fine-tuned skill. You don't have to be overly athletic. But Mbilli is an unadulterated pressure fighter, but he's also very skilled and also very athletic. And that's what makes him so fun to watch. And like, his power isn't necessarily one punch power, but it's over the course of 3 or 4 or 5 rounds power. Can you withstand it? And most people can't.
Don't.
And so Mark Heffron, we've seen him knocked out a couple times. We've seen him struggle against like taller fighters and guys that move, but he's not going to have that problem against Christian Mbilli, because Christian Mbilli is not going to run. Christian Mbilli is not going to try to beat you from distance with his jab. Christian Mbilli is going to get inside. He's going to put his head on your chest and he's going to wing punches. But again, he's not a face first brawler. Like, if he has to pivot to an angle to land these punches, that's what he's going to do. The times we've seen Christian Mbilli struggle is when a longer opponent can kind of keep him at mid-range, but that's not what Mark Heffron does. Mark Heffron likes to get on the inside too and throw left hooks. And so for as long as this fight lasts, it's going to be funny because it's two aggressive guys that don't like to dance. They don't like it when the other guy dances. Although Christian Mbilli, like, if you try to run from Christian Mbilli, again, because he is so athletic and so smart, like, he has ways to make the ring small and make you fight at his distance. These are his superpowers. But again, with Heffron, he's not going to have that problem. He's going to have a guy that also wants to be on the inside, also wants to throw left hooks. But Heffron has also been knocked out a couple times. And so stylistically, this is one of these fights that, a bunch of people tune in on ESPN Plus and see a really spectacular fight that, if it unfolds according to the promoter's plan, ends with Christian and Mbilli looking great, but it's going to be a fun fight. And so Mbilli, he is, for more background, but you guys are pretty like a hardcore group of boxing fans, right?
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff about like Eye of the Tiger management. I don't even have to tell you guys because you're like, no, yeah, I'll tell you about Eric Bazinian and because this promotional group from Montreal, they had 3 world ranked super middleweights, right? They had Bazinian, who almost lost to Shaquille Finn the other week. That was the last fight we called for ESPN Plus. They have Mbilli and they have Oleksandr Usyk, who's in action on another card we're doing from Montreal, June 6th. And so all 3 of these guys, like, their goal is to try to find a way to force Canelo to fight them. But again, for a guy like Canelo, he's very concerned with how much money he's going to make. And so he's very concerned with putting on the biggest show possible. So he's very concerned with finding a B-side that has a big following, a lot of money behind him. And so this is the challenge that Mbilli has right now. He really wants that Canelo fight. To the extent that boxing is a competition, he has the resume. He's world ranked in every major sanctioning body. Like, there's literally the only place to go from here for him is a title fight, but one guy has all the titles, so that's where it goes. But again, building the type of following that's gonna get Canelo's attention is a different challenge, and that's the part where boxing is a business, and that's where all these Eye of the Tiger 168-pound fighters, that's kind of where they're stuck. Because if Canelo's looking at an opponent that's going to make him even richer,
it may not be.
Yeah, and Billy's not his first choice. And as much as we laugh at Edgar Berlanga, like, Edgar Berlanga
is going to bring in
as a built-in fan base. He's fairly popular. As a business decision, and again, in terms of most money for the least risk, that's a no-brainer for Canelo. And so it's funny because we talk about how relieved we are that there's a undisputed heavyweight champion. But what's the flip side, Akeem, of having an undisputed heavyweight champion, of having an undisputed champion in any weight class?
Oh, they have all the belts.
Yeah. And it's because we always hear people complaining about the 168-pound division. Oh, Canelo's got the whole division locked up. Okay, but he's undisputed champion. So do you guys want an undisputed champion? Or do you want lots of title fights because there's lots of titles because there's lots of champions?
That's a good
right?
point.
It's very difficult to have both. So
that's a good point.
There we go.
That's a good
point. It's very difficult to have both. So the point is May 25th, ESPN Plus if you're in the US, punchinggrace.com if you're in Canada. And the folks at at Eye of the Tiger keep telling me to remind Americans they can also subscribe to Punching Grace. So you can get the fights archived. If you want to work on your French, you can watch the French broadcasts. But for the most part, I remind Canadians that Punching Grace is the place to watch the fights, and Americans that ESPN Plus is the place to watch those fights. And we'll be back June 6th.
I know we're over the time, man. Do you got like 10 more minutes? If not, we can do, because I want to get your thoughts on this, man, because you've covered this next guy that we're going to be talking about as well. Just next. Again, we got Morgan Campbell on deck here, Welterweight sports journalist, boxing commentator, as you can see, newly minted author in the background there. Man, so My Fighting Family out now. And I actually ordered a copy, man. So I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Let me know when it arrives.
I will. So I won't get to all the comments. I'm going to try to, but man, I wanted to ask you about this next matchup, man.
Yes.
You've been covering Steve Claggett for a while now. Steve Claggett, as we've talked about, is kind of like one of those pioneer Canadian boxers who's finally getting, in these past couple of years, it seems like, and I've spoken to him, he's like, Akeem, like I finally have the right promotion around me. Yeah. I finally have consistent training, a team. And it's been showing. He's been looking really good in his previous 5 fights.
Yeah.
What do you think about this one, man? A lot of people are going to say it's a cherry pick by Teofimo Lopez. Personally, I like this fight. But what do you think about this fight, man? And when you think about it, what comes to mind? What's everything that you unpack with this one?
Well, first, from Teofimo Lopez's perspective, the times we've seen Teofimo look his best is when he has an opponent that he doesn't have to search for.
Yep.
Someone that comes to him or at least stands still. When someone's going to box Teofimo Lopez, he struggles a little bit. He might not lose, but like Jermaine Ortiz, that was not an exciting fight, but it was definitely not like a clear win for Teofimo. And if someone had said to me, I think Jermaine Ortiz won that fight, I would say, you might not be wrong. But file this under styles make fights. So if you're Team Teofimo, the way to make people forget about the Jermaine Ortiz fight is to get you a pressure fighter as your next opponent.
Yeah.
And someone that Teo's not going to have to look for. And you can not allow Teo to do his work, but, allow Teo to do his work. Do what makes Teofimo, what makes him look good. And Steve Claggett, in a lot of ways, is that guy. Like, Steve Claggett is an old school pressure fighter.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't heard of Steve Claggett, I could see why you might be skeptical of the choice of Steve Claggett as an opponent. But if you've seen Steve Claggett fight, you will know why he should make for an exciting matchup with Teofimo Lopez, like for as long as it lasts. Because whatever you don't think Steve Claggett will be, like, he's not afraid of Teofimo Lopez. Steve Claggett has a very defined identity as a fighter. He is an old school pressure fighter, a smart pressure fighter. We talked about Mbilli as a pressure fighter. He's not nearly as athletic or explosive as Mbilli, but Steve Claggett, again, has this way of making the ring small and just not giving you time to think or to breathe.
Yeah.
And Steve Claggett has just improved. His skill set has just improved so drastically since he set up shop in Montreal. Yeah, and I covered his fight last year against Machado. I covered the Madueño fight, Miguel Madueño. And Madueño now he's got this, he rebounded. He's got this Keyshawn Davis fight, so like, it's not like Claggett has been in Montreal beating up on tomato cans, you know. And Claggett also understands what it means to be on the B side.
Yes, he does.
The first time I met Steve Claggett, this was 2018. He was here. We were doing a show in Brampton. Same thing, Corey Erdman and I on the call. And they brought him in to fight Petros Ananian.
Oh, the dude who fought Matthias.
Thank you. And Claggett got dropped early in that fight. And it just worked his way back into that fight. Won that fight by decision. And then Ananian, a couple years later, winds up beating Subriel Matias. So, like, Steve Claggett is still the man who beat the man who beat the man, right? Mm-hmm. He's the guy that beat Ananian who beat Matias. And so Steve Claggett, again, might not have a big following outside of hardcore boxing nerds. He's not a name people recognize. He's definitely not a name that like casual sports fans recognize when they happen to land on the boxing page on ESPN.com. But he is a much improved fighter. You talked earlier in this show about like the mid-career fighter, what kind of big picture adjustments can they make to improve in the second half of their career? And Steve Claggett has done that. Setting up shop in Montreal, running off a string of wins again against some pretty good opponents, right? And so it's sort of a shame that a lot of American fans, when they think about this matchup, just see this guy from Canada and think that he is a scrub that they found to lose to Teofimo. And obviously, like, Top Rank called Claggett because Top Rank does not expect Claggett to beat Teofimo. But to the extent that styles make fights, they do understand that the way Claggett fights is going to force Teofimo Lopez into an entertaining fight. Now, is that an entertaining fight where Teofimo shines because this pressure fighter also leaves himself open to Teofimo's offense, or is this an entertaining fight in the sense that it's very competitive? You know, Claggett's problem is that Teofimo is so athletic and so physically strong, and so might be able to either avoid or withstand some of this pressure that Claggett generally uses to suffocate people. But you know, Claggett, in terms of being deserving of a big fight and a payday for as long as he's been at it, for the people he's beaten and the people he's lost to, like, Claggett deserves a shot on a bigger stage for some real money. You know, he's well paid in Montreal, but like for some real money. Absolutely. To the extent that this is a sport and being really good at the sport should avail you some of the privileges of the business instead of just being this really good fighter that never gets a big payday. Like, no, Claggett has earned this. He's not some guy that failed his way into this fight. And so, again, Claggett's big problem is just dealing with a guy as fast, as athletic, as strong, physically strong as Teofimo Lopez is. That's Claggett's problem, because the guys we've seen Claggett against, they've been good fighters, but just physically, they don't have the physical presence that Teofimo Lopez has. So we'll see if Lopez wilts under the pressure the way Miguel Madueño did. Completely different class of opponent.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting, man. Again, I'm glad Claggett is getting the opportunity, and you know, Teofimo. My thing is always for him, like when he knows that, like, he's fighting, example, a guy like Josh Taylor, right? He knows the stakes there, and he will raise himself to the occasion.
Yes.
But I think sometimes he just doesn't get up for the fight.
And he fights to like the perceived level of his competition, except some of these guys that he's underestimating are actually pretty good.
Yeah. I think if he's not careful, Claggett could make it a way tougher fight than Teofimo wants it. But the thing is, for me, is as you know, Claggett has put forth some great performances and he lost. Not that he lost necessarily in the ring, but not the popularity contest on the scorecards, and he didn't get that nod. And if he puts a spectacular performance, which I'm sure that he will, the man is steady, ready for the opportunity, but I don't know if he wins on the cards, if it does go to the cards, even if it looks like he's winning the fight.
This is the only sport in the world where we can talk like this.
Yeah.
About where like somewhere between passive bias and like borderline corruption on the part of the officials is just assumed based on who's playing and where the event's taking place. Like, people kind of talk about it, but not seriously. You talk about NBA superstars as getting foul calls or whatever, right? But you don't like, oh, who's is Ed Hockley refereeing the Super Bowl? Oh yeah, that's a clear advantage for Patrick Mahomes. Like, you don't, right? But boxing, we're like, yeah, you know what? It does not matter how well Steve Claggett does. He's not going to win a decision. Only sport where we talk like that, but it's not untrue. And I think Steve Claggett understands that, like, either if he's going to win, it's either by knockout or he just really, really, really has to beat up on Teofimo Lopez, because the chances of winning a decision on a card where Teofimo Lopez is the A side of the main event, and is the guy that's supposed to win, it's tough. But Steve Claggett has been in this situation before, because that's the situation he was in against Petros Santillan, right?
Yeah.
And so Steve Claggett, I think, is experienced enough not to worry about that and let somebody else worry about if you think the judges are going to be unfair to you or whatever. Like, he is going to focus on his preparation, focus on his game plan, focus on trying to make Teofimo Lopez sweat, and focus on, I'm sure he's preparing for the best version of Teofimo, but if Teofimo decides he's going to fight down to the level of his perceived opposition, that's a window of opportunity opening for Steve Claggett.
Man, Morgan, thank you so much for your time, man. I'm gonna get you out on this. Yes. Remind us again what time the fight starts, how they can watch it this weekend.
Okay, May 25th. Christian Mbilli, Mark Heffron in the main event. We're at the Centre Gervais Auto. Here we go, a little French for you guys.
Oh, the French is strong, man.
In Shawinigan, Quebec. So that's May 25th. I want to say the main card starts at 7 p.m. Punchinggrace.com if you're in Canada. ESPN Plus if you're in the U.S. Arslan Bekmambetov, the heavyweight. That's right.
He's back.
He's making his comeback on that card. He was supposed to fight Junior Fall. Junior Fall retired mid-training camp. So he's fighting the Serbian champion, Miljan Rovkanin, I think. If I pronounce I don't speak Serbian, I might have got the name wrong. Albert Ramirez was supposed to fight light heavyweight title eliminator in the co-main event. There was an injury. I'm not sure if it was to Ramirez or Adam Dinas. So that fight is postponed until whenever, but it's still going to be a great card. For you, these are hardcore fans. So if you guys have not seen Wilkins Mathieu, who is Eye of the Tigers,
I like that.
19-year-old super middleweight.
Yeah, he's good.
He is an absolute pleasure to watch. Tune in early to the undercard fights because he's a pleasure to watch. John Orobio, El Tigre. He's a 20-year-old kid from Colombia, moved up to Montreal following the footsteps of Eleider Alvarez and Oscar Rivas. Uprooted his whole 20-year-old life, moved to Montreal. He's based in Montreal now. Wow. This guy is, I think he's 7-0, 8-0. I've called most of the fights, in his pro career. Get on the bandwagon early. So they will both be fighting May 25th. And then we're back in Montreal June 6th, Thursday night. And same deal, punchinggrace.com in Canada, ESPN Plus in the US. Stephen Butler versus Patrice Volney. That might be the co-main event, but that's a big local fight. Two guys from Montreal with world class who have been at the world class level and are looking to get back to the world class level. Osleis Iglesias in the main event. And it might be a quick turnaround for Orobio. He might be back on that card on a week and a half notice. But join us on both of those. It's always fun. Corey Erdman does the play-by-play. I do the analysis. We mix in a little 8th grade French translating the ring corner talk between rounds. We always have a very, very, very good time. If you have not watched the fights that Corey and I broadcast, it's not like normal broadcast. It's much more like watching the fight with your friends. We don't make a big show about it being like the Manning cast, but this is just the vibe we try to create. So we have a good time. ESPN Plus if you're in the US, punchinggrace.com if you're in Canada. And I think in Latin America, it's probably ESPN Knockout.
Man, real quick, check out this last comment here. Eric R says, yeah, corruption in boxing is like the introduction to Fight Club.
It's so weird where we just take it for granted. because the fight is in a given town, that the judges are just not gonna treat the fight fairly. Like, why? We just take it. Well, it's in his hometown. Yeah, I guess we can't win. Again, with football, we're like, okay, we get that the crowd's going to be on your side, and the teams often engage in gamesmanship. Like the University of Iowa, they paint the visitors' locker room pink.
Oh wow!
So the visiting team comes in, and the pink paint is supposed to make you less aggressive. You get in there, you just start feeling warm and friendly and stuff. Like you get that, but what you're not supposed to get is just the referees. The referees making a complete different set of decisions than they should make based on the fact that they're in Kinnick Stadium and not in Ann Arbor. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In boxing, we're just like, well, it's in the other guy's hometown, or the other guy's promoter's the lead promoter. So we guess the judges are all going to lean that way. Why? And we know why, but still.
Hey,
it
as Eric R. said,
it does not happen in any other sport.
Man, thank you so much, man. Sorry for those in the comments. I didn't get to all of them, man, but I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. I will have some prediction videos up this week. I know I keep seeing the same names, but I'm going to get there. Again, appreciate everybody that took the time to tune in, man. Really means a lot. Your support is greatly appreciated. Morgan, again, thank you so much for your time. Again, man, we'll be tuning in Friday, man. Everybody, have a great rest of your day and night. And thanks again for supporting. And we'll definitely see you next week.